Hey guys, John here. In today's video, we're checking out some new pedals by a new brand. These four wonderful pedals by Gigagain. Gigagain? 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 Nah, I'm just kidding. I think it's Gigagain. But yeah, this is an exciting new brand with some awesome pedals that we're going to take a look at today. We have the Giga Screamer, the Superkick, the Gainster, and the Dualay over here. They actually sent me this by accident, but we're going to check it out anyway. It should be fun. So what sets this brand apart from other brands? Well, it's a Chinese brand, and I hear you thinking already, oh, it's another one of those Chinese brands that make cheap pedals. Well, no, actually, these aren't very cheap. They are actually unique and quite sturdy. I think they're going to cost somewhere between $60 and $110 or euros or something. So they're not super affordable. They don't sell directly to Amazon and stuff like that. They have custom enclosures, so they're quite portable. And the logo is engraved on all the bottoms of the pedals here. So, you know, they make their own enclosures. They also have custom knobs, which are quite fancy. And what also makes all of them unique is that you can slide out the battery compartment because it's magnetic. So that's kind of cool, right? Just so you have easy access to the battery. You don't have to like screw anything open. So this is how they look. Again, very sturdy. And I think all of them have a red custom enclosure, which is their look. That's the Gigagain look, I guess. So over here we have the Giga Screamer, which is the most exciting pedal for me. It's basically a tube screamer with some cool features on it that set it apart from other tube screamer-like pedals. So that's the Giga Screamer. We'll check that out first. But we also have the Superkick, which is a transparent boost. What I really like about this pedal is the LED level indicator. When you play through it, you can see how loud you're playing the guitar, even when the pedal is bypassed. And then we have the Gainster, which is basically an amp-in-a-box style pedal, kind of crunchy, high gain, and modern. And then this Dualay, which is a dual delay. It's kind of like an analog delay. Now note that all the pedals have a sturdy foot switch, as well as an on and off switch so that you don't drain your battery when you're not using the pedal. That's a cool little feature as well. And as I mentioned, all the enclosures are red and they have the Gigagain logo engraved. And with all the pedals, you can slide out that drawer to insert your battery. Now, massive thanks to the folks at Gigagain for sponsoring this video. I really appreciate it. For all the tones in this video, I'm using this Schecter PT Black OPS with the Fishman Fluence Modern Open Core in the single bridge position. Right now it's set to the passive voicing for a more thick and dynamic sound. That is going into the pedals, and the pedals are going into my Lichtlaerm Audio Prometheus, which is a great amp for showcasing how pedals sound. That is going into the Grossmann Fatbox 1x12 cab, in which I've loaded up my trusty Celestion Vintage 30. Mic'd up with 3 mics, 2 SM57s and 1 MD421 Kompakt, sent into the DAW, and that's what you're hearing. So right now I'm on the lead channel on the thickest tone, so the most sludgy tone. You can dial this amp in to sound more modern and tight, but we're not going to do that. We're going to leave that to the Gigagain Screamer. Okay, so this is how the raw amplifier sounds with the current settings. Quite sludgy and thick, right? So that's what we're going to do. And then we're going to use the Giga Screamer to tighten up the tone, which is how I like to use pedals like tube screamers and stuff. You know, for a more modern purpose, if you will. Let's take a quick look at the controls of the pedal. So obviously we have the bypass switch over here. Then on the left, we have a gain control. Over here, we have a tone control and a volume control. Those are the classic tube screamer controls that you'll find on basically any tube screamer type pedal, right? Now for high gain boosting, I like to set gain to 0, crank the tone up a little bit, maybe for extended range guitars, crank that up a little bit more even, and then volume to taste, basically to, you know, dial in the amount of gain and saturation that you want. Let's turn it on, take a listen, and then I'll show you what these little switches do, okay? So this is with the pedal on. Nice and modern and tight. Bypassed once again. So that's really sludgy and thick, and when we enable the pedal, tightens it right up. So just with the basic settings alone, this is a great sounding tube screamer, if you will. Let's make it even more aggressive by cranking up the tone. Just for fun, let's go all the way. Yeah, so that's a really aggressive tone with a lot of mid-range cuts, really cutting through that thick distortion, right? I've turned the tone down a little bit. So yeah, that's how I like to use tube screamer type pedals, and I'm sure that 99% of you who are watching right now do the same, right? And it works. Now, if you're going into a bit of a low gain amplifier with not a lot of gain and you want to add some saturation, then of course you can also use the gain control to add some saturation. We can just try that. So let's set the amplifier to the low gain mode. This is the vintage mode of the amplifier, has less gain. If we turn on the boost, it's still, you know, on the low gain side. Let's crank the level and add some gain in there as well. Let's add a little bit more. So you can add some crunch, right, with the gain control. However, you're going to get a different character with the gain control rather than just boosting into an already high gain tone, right? Now, let's go back to the modern mode or the high gain mode, the lead mode. Yeah, so just with the basic settings, it's already a really pleasing tube screamer pedal. Now we have a bunch of switches over here. On the left side, we have this BB switch. Let's see what that does, okay? So that switch seems to add a lot of bottom end and thickness, right? Let's bypass the pedal. So with that BB switch on, it's almost kind of fuzzy and doomy and really thick sounding. Those palm mutes are super thumpy. So that's a really cool way to change the character of the pedal quite drastically. I've set it back to off. Going back to that traditional, you know, cutting and more tight sound. Okay, then the second switch over here, we have an 808 and a 9 setting. So the 9 setting will make the pedal sound like a TS9, I believe is what the model number is. So let's switch from 808 to 9. Back to 808. Back to 9. So the difference is subtle, but there is a difference. I feel like with the 9 setting, the sound is a bit more fat and big, if you will. So again, this is the 808 setting. The 9 setting. The low-end response seems to be a little bit different, but it's a very subtle difference. Let's just go back to 808, and then the final control, which is the scoop control. You know, obviously Tube Screamer type pedals, they have a mid hump. So they boost the mids so that the sound is more articulate and cutting. When you scoop the mids out, you're gonna get a different response. So this is with the default setting. Let's turn on the scoop. So that mid hump and mid honk, that is, you know, what people like to use these pedals for, kind of disappears with that. So you get a different flavor. Let's turn the pedal off. And on with the scoop setting. So it does add a bit of tightness and aggression, but it's not nearly as drastic as with that off. I like it with it off because that's the traditional Tube Screamer sound. So yeah, that is the Giga Screamer, a very nice Tube Screamer pedal with some functions to tweak the sound and to make it more unique for sure. I especially really like the BB switch to add that really thick bottom end for if you want to get super sludgy and sort of overload the amplifier a little bit. I like it. It's a good pedal, a good boost for sure. All right, now we're going to check out this Superkick. As I mentioned, when you play, there's a level indicator, so that's a really cool touch. This is a more simple pedal. It's a transparent boost with a boost control, so that controls the amount of boost. And then we have a warm and standard switch. The standard switch is basically fully transparent, I think, and then warm makes the sound a little bit more warm. So if you have a low gain amplifier that you want to get a little bit more juice out of, this can be a great pedal just to add gain coming from your guitar. All right? So very transparent, just making your guitar louder going into the amplifier. So what we're going to do is switch back to the vintage mode. So that's a good crunchy tone, but not high gain. Say we want to add a little bit of juice, then we can use this pedal to add more juice, okay? I've turned it on. Let's take a listen. Right now the boost control is set to 3 o'clock-ish. Let's crank it up all the way to see how much gain we can add. So that adds a good amount of gain. Pedal off. Pedal on. So that's what this pedal is good for. Very simple, very effective. Let's try the warm setting as well. Pedal off. Pedal on. So, you know, this is a good pedal for if you have like a crunchy rhythm tone and you just want to add a little bit more juice for a solo, for example, then this could be a good pedal to have. Again, very simple and effective. And I do really like the fact that this LED strip lights up when you're playing through it. So that's a cool touch as well. So those are the Giga Screamer and the Superkick. Okay, basically pedals to enhance the character of your amplifier or add gain. Okay. Now we're going to check out the Gainster, which is kind of like an amp in a box style pedal. All right. For that, we're going to go to the clean channel. So this is the pure sound of the clean channel. Kind of flat and dry, which I'm doing on purpose because those sort of tones are very suitable for pedals like this. Okay. Now, let's turn the pedal on and see what we get. All right, that's pretty cutting. Let's add some mids and add a bit of treble there. Let's also add a little bit of treble on the amplifier, subtract some bass, and also add a little bit of volume. Pedal off. So all that tone is coming from the pedal. So it has like a really scooped and thrashy sound. Kind of reminds me of Rammstein, to be honest. Let's add a little bit of mids, crank the gain up all the way, and take a listen to how that sounds. Pretty thrashy. I wish there was a little bit more saturation on tap with the gain control, but it is enough, okay? Now, depending on the amp that you're going to use this with, you're going to dial this in pretty differently, okay? They say that you can also use it directly into an effects return, so in the power amp of your amp. So we can try that. This amplifier has a preamp defeat function that turns the preamp off completely so that we're going into the power amp. Let's see how that sounds, okay? Very different, obviously. A bit more mid-honky and humpy. So let's dial in this pedal so that it sounds better. I'm going to add some level. I'm going to add some bass, subtract some mids, see how that sounds. So as you can hear, it sounds pretty good, but I do have to crank up the treble once again all the way to get the clearest sound out of it. But that does sound pretty tight and focused. So I think it's a good pedal, but you're going to have to find some settings on your amplifier that work well with it. Especially the mid control. We can see what the sweep is of the mid control. That's all the way off, very scooped, obviously. That's all the way on, so very honky. Okay, so there's a lot of range on these controls, so you will probably be able to find a good tone for your amp. But as I mentioned, the treble control is cranked up all the way. If I were to set it to, let's say, 1 o'clock, it is a bit darker sounding, as you can hear, right? Now, we have a volume control, a gain control, and a 3-band EQ. Very simple. So in terms of controls, it's not super flexible, but there is this other control, the channel switch. Right now it's set to channel 2, which is the rhythm mode, if you will. Channel 1 adds a lot more mid-range. That is very honky in the mids, okay? Way too much for my taste, so I prefer channel 2. Just sounds much more balanced. Again, let's crank the treble. That's a good tight chug. Let's add some bass in there as well. So that's the Gainster. Now, finally, let's go back to the normal clean channel. Finally, we also have the Dualay, which again, they sent by accident, but that's okay. We're gonna have some fun with it. Again, I'm on the clean channel with some basic settings. Okay, that's gonna work. And now let's turn on this pedal and see how it sounds, okay? As you can hear, it sounds very analog in the decay, so you can hear the notes sort of degrading quality as they fade out, so that's cool. Now, this is a dual delay pedal, so there are 2 delays in this pedal. You can either use one of them or use them both at the same time. So over here we have the time control for delay 1 as well as a mix for delay 1. We have a global feedback control and then a time and mix for delay 2. So you can control the time and the mix for each delay individually, which is nice. We also have this parallel serial switch over here, so you can either run them in parallel or in series, right? And then we have a trill switch so that the delay continues when you turn the pedal off. We can try that. That's actually really nice. All right, so the mix is set halfway right now. Let's crank the mix of both the delays up a little bit. Add some feedback just to make it sound a bit more over the top. So it was starting to feedback there. You can do some really crazy things with that. Just for fun, let's do that. So let's see how crazy we can make it sound. Let's turn delay 2 off and let's crank the feedback. That's cool. So that's like a really analog sounding delay, obviously. So this is just with one single delay. And then we're going to add the second one back in. It can be a little bit difficult to balance the delay times of the 2 delays. Let's try serial. So that's a really different rhythmical effect. It does feedback quite easily, so keep that feedback control under control, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I just wanted to show you that pedal real quick. You can get some really cool creative and analog sounding delays out of that. So these are the Gigagain pedals. Honestly, I'm having a lot of fun with them, especially the Giga Screamer. That's just my favorite because it's a really well-crafted tube screamer-like pedal with some controls that you don't see with other pedals often, you know, with the 9 switch for a little bit of a different flavor, the BB mode for extra thickness, and then of course also this scoop control which is nice for changing the voicing of the pedal. So that's my favorite, but this can also be very useful for certain rigs, you know, for undergained amplifiers that just need a little bit more juice, for example. It's a cool amp in a box pedal, the Gainster. Not super special, but it has a good thrashy sound when you find the right settings. Channel 1 is just too mid-honky for my taste. And then this is a very fun creative pedal. I'm not really a delay pedal user. I should use delays more often because they're just a lot of fun. But I do appreciate the quirkiness of this pedal and the options that it gives you. So again, massive thanks to the folks at Gigagain for sponsoring this video and for sending these pedals over. I really appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. I'd love to know. Also be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons, as that really helps the channel out. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Check out my affiliate links if you want to support this channel directly. And check out my website. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks, guys. Cheers.